Has no one ever expounded on actual theories for why Reddit is like that? Like, I mean, actually, like, I want, like, a sociological, psychological breakdown of why Reddit is like that.
Well, here it is. I don't exactly remember the first time I posted on Reddit, but there were several times where people on Reddit left me feeling terrible. I recently posted on Reddit asking what age I look like, since I've been told by a lot of people that I look really young. For reference, I'm 17 and people have told me that I look like I'm 13, which is actually insane. And these are some of the comments I received. Most messages were actually from, I think, pedophiles, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the topic of the video, but I just want to stress how dangerous it actually is out there and how many dangerous people are on the internet. The worst comment I got was actually not holy chopped, but instead a pedo's dream. Yes, I did in fact get that comment on Reddit. I don't even know what to say. And most people commented about the fact that I looked like a 12-year-old boy, which doesn't necessarily affect me. I don't really care, but it was meant as an insult. People were being like brutally honest. Another example, I posted recently a first draft of my opening chapter of my novel that I'm writing, and all the comments were incredibly insulting on Reddit. Like, most of them were not even constructive criticism, like just straight on, this is shit. But the thing is, the next time I tried this, a few weeks ago when my writing had definitely improved since then, I didn't actually get any negative comments, so it might have just been that my writing was actually shit. But the point still stands. Why are people so overly negative and brutally honest on Reddit? Why do they feel the need, it's like a craving for the people on Reddit, to just hate on everyone? The two examples that made me want to record this video, though, are the following. They made me realize that even though this doesn't go for everyone on Reddit, the vast majority of people on there have certain reasons as to why they're on the app, and it's become pretty obvious to me what those reasons are. I sort of just wanted to do something with these experiences, so I thought I'd go on Reddit and share some tips and some hopeful comments on there. Because the first thing that came to my mind was to just help others in a similar situation, which would then in turn make me feel like at least my experience was worth something. So I posted something quick and hopeful on /depression, that subreddit. And when I tell you that 99%, except for like 2 comments, of the people commenting on there were middle-aged or old people saying that they hated me for posting me, that they're mad at me for saying that it's gonna get better, because in their opinion, it doesn't, that I'm making them feel worse because they have been suffering from depression for decades, and that it simply isn't going to get better. That is literally what the people on there said. By the way, for those of you who don't know, chronic depression is a thing. It doesn't affect the majority of people who suffer from depression, though. It's not rare either, but also not 99% of people with depression suffer from it for decades or for their entire lives. That's not what's seen as normal with depression. For proof, a study analyzed the difference between chronic and non-chronic depression and found that out of 954 depressed inpatients, 113, which is 11.8%, fulfilled the criteria for chronic depression, whereas 841 patients, which is 88.2%, had non-chronic courses of depression. That is the vast majority of people who have non-chronic depression, at least for the people in this study. So the people on Reddit were essentially wrong. I'm not saying that their experiences are wrong, but not everyone has a chronic course for depression, and they really made me feel like basically everyone is going to suffer from depression their entire lives, which is not the case. The other example that made me realize something sort of like bigger is going on was something less definite, which I can't show you any studies about, but I still have sort of like, I guess, proof that it's not true. So I've been struggling with the fear of losing a parent later in life. Like, they're healthy, they're fine, but like, it's, I guess, a fear that every kid or teenager or young adult has. Like, losing a parent is like the worst thing that can happen to you when you're young. So I went onto Reddit and I asked people whether it was bearable, like bearable in the sense that it was painful, but it was a bearable pain. If they could grieve and then it was bearable, and at some point they were okay again on Reddit, and like about people who have lost a parent later in life. And what I got was hundreds, like literally hundreds of people telling me their traumatic stories about their parents, their traumatic stories about how their parents passed away and how they have never gotten over it, how it was the most devastating thing in their entire lives, and that how they still are grieving like years, like decades later. And when I tell you that I felt worse after that, I'm not lying. Hi, this is me editing the video. I just want to say that I sounded a little insensitive here. No hate to the people who told me about their traumatic stories. Obviously, that's a very sensitive topic. I just wanted to mention that in the post, I specifically told people to only comment if they lost their parents later in life. And a lot of young people who lost their parents when they were like 20 shared their stories, which I didn't ask for. The post was only for people to sort of like relieve my fear, in the sense that I wanted to feel like I didn't have that much to be afraid of later. And I know it's not my place to tell people what to comment, but it just did not help at all and made me feel much worse. That's why I wanted to include it in the video. No hate to anyone who shared their stories. It's like a very sensitive thing to do, and I'm sorry if I offended anyone. I know loss is a part of life, and I wasn't saying like I want you to tell me loss is gonna be fine, but I just wanted some sort of proof that it was gonna be okay at some point. But the truth of the matter is that yes, death can be traumatic at any age, or generally is very painful, but as adults, for most people, the loss of a parent is, like I asked, bearable, meaning that most people are able to grieve well if they lose a parent later in life, because they are just much more equipped to deal with it. My therapist confirmed this, by the way, and my parents as well, so if you think otherwise, then that's okay, but what is normal is that losing your parents later in life doesn't feel like the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Again, it can be normal, but usually only under specific circumstances. So for me, Reddit painted a very wrong picture of this scenario. One that depicts the loss of a parent as something that's always traumatic and unbearable at any age. And that made me feel worse, obviously. And I'll get back to these experiences and examples later on, but first, let's see what the internet generally says about Reddit and how other people experience how Redditors act.
Hey guys, just wondering if anyone can tell me the best coffee machine. Thanks. Oh shit, someone responded. I wonder what they said. Hello, fellow Redditor here. I'd recommend the Breville Espresso Express machine. Dude, what the fuck? This thing's like $1,000. Is he serious right now? Strangers, call me old-fashioned, but I think if you aren't hand-pressing your coffee, you're doing it wrong. That's just my opinion, though. Hand-pressed? Did I not say in the post best coffee machine?
Oh, dude, this is like my childhood right here.
Yes, childhood. We are now adults, therefore shouldn't be here. Especially not at... I don't have a watch.
I just made a Reddit, and this is how everyone responds to me.
I didn't know there were still people who didn't know how to do this. I've seen videos of monkeys in the zoo who knew how to do this even.
So what we can see here is that most people describe Redditors as rude, honest, offensive, and somehow angry for some reason. And to understand what kind of people are actually behind the usernames of, for example, top_session_2234, I don't know, people are just called that on Reddit, we need to take a closer look at Reddit itself. For a very quick and somehow unnecessary, but we're still gonna talk about it, history of Reddit, it was originally pitched by two college roommates as a restaurant ordering service, but turned into the Reddit that we know now as a social media platform with the encouragement of the investor Paul Graham. And what is really important here is that the features were added later on, and those include the voting system. For example, you can up and downvote comments. Then the fact that you can stay anonymous, which is also really important. And this karma system, meaning you can have good or bad karma, and that might make you unable to join or post in a certain subreddit. And this is really important, the fact that they have subreddits in general, as in these niche communities which can create a feeling of community, but also hostility. There's actually a term called group polarization, and it basically means that with a group of like-minded people, their opinions often become naturally more extreme. And this can lead to one-sided views of reality or bluntness, as we see on Reddit. And subreddits are what lead to that. They make you feel like you're a part of this niche community, and you somehow maybe have all the same opinions, and then you can be more honest and more offensive, or just like brutally honest. Now this explains why some people might be more blunt and honest on Reddit, but it still doesn't relate to the experiences that I have had so far. Let's talk about them. Let's look at those in some more detail, because it'll make us understand why exactly people even are on Reddit and what leads them to answer posts like mine. So my first example was the one about depression and chronic depression. Only people who seem to have chronic depression and seem to have lost all hope comment commented on my post. But why is that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. There are 3 main reasons that I can think of why people would be scrolling through subreddits like /depression or similar ones. The first one is that people are simply curious as to what is going on there and just want to know more about depression, which I think is pretty rare, but if it does happen, people don't usually comment under posts like mine. The second reason is that people are looking to encourage others to, I don't know, get help or to give some tips or just share their positive experiences to make others feel well, which I tried to do. And lastly, the most common type of people we'll find on these subs are people who are looking to vent. When you're under good treatment, have a support system and lots of options to try and make you feel better and heal from your depression, people don't usually feel the need to vent on apps like this because first of all, they have other people to vent to, or second of all, they don't even feel the need to vent about things like that at all. Not to mention that hopelessness is also a symptom of depression itself. But some people might still be able to believe that they will eventually get out of their depression. For example, if they've had recurring depressive episodes and know that every depressive episode ends, which it does, or if they have had confirmation from a therapist who says that they strongly believe that they will heal from their depression. But those people who don't have those systems, those people who have maybe undergone treatment and haven't gotten better or just generally feel hopeless, those are the people that usually comment under my posts, or generally posts who include the words, "Read this if you lost hope," because they did, and posts that include the words, "It'll get better," and then they'll think, well, it didn't for me, so f you for thinking that it will. You are basically lying, because it didn't help me, so why would anyone get better? Same goes for the post about losing your parents. You probably won't find adults who were able to grieve their parents in a healthy way. Look up words like parent, loss, grief on Reddit, or maybe Google it, maybe they'll talk to friends or something, but usually people who are able to grieve in a healthy way don't go onto Reddit and then vent about their traumatic experiences. What reason would they have? The ones who do feel the need to share their story are the ones who do have a traumatic story to share, and who cope by sharing it. Posting on Reddit is either I give people information, I want information, or I'm venting. And most people under my posts were venting. So that doesn't mean that it was traumatic for like 99% of people who lost their parents, but just that the people who commented, for those it was traumatic. But let's look at another theory a commenter made on TikTok. One person said, the people on Reddit think being right, knowing a lot about a topic, excuses having no manners or consideration for others. Also, being an unpaid mod is the first and only power they ever had in their life. What I would definitely agree with here is the first part, the simple concept of answering people's question, which Reddit is mostly for, can make people feel superior, and as this person said, feels like an excuse to use bad manners. And also I wanted to mention that there are mods, but you can still basically comment under a post anything that you like, and there's almost no moderations in the comments. And except for that, we have to take into consideration that Reddit is just social media. People can hide behind a screen, and sometimes there isn't much we can do about it, because people are just hateful and insecure. Alright, so even if the video was a little shorter, I still hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for 300 subscribers. I really love your comments. I would really appreciate if you gave me your opinion on this topic. You can share some weird experiences that you've had on Reddit, because I know everyone who's been on there has had some weird experiences, or just generally your opinion on the topic. Leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe if you like the channel, and watch another video. Bye!